Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Jay.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, I'm here with just Jay, which means this is a great hobby episode.
Yes, that is what this is. Sorry, I took a moment there to answer you because just as we were talking, I saw Atomic Mass post something. I was like, please be Legion. No, it's not. It's MCP. So, still a hobby episode.
Yeah, we look, we got a big news dump at Mini Extravaganza.
Yes, for sure. Yeah,
which we've talked all about that stuff since. But we have not done a proper hobby episode in a while, so that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah. And before we start that, just a little thing. If you guys get a chance, if you're into like RPG podcasts, we launched a new RPG podcast called Iron and Tentacles. It's a Cthulhu themed RPG podcast. It's audio only right now, so you can search it up on wherever you get your audio podcasts. And just do me a favor, check it out. It's a bunch of us from our network here, plus we brought in another one of the Stabcast members on it as well, Ben, and AJST's wife is actually on it. So we have a whole group. It's pretty great. It's been a ton of fun. And this week, so tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, our official episode 1 comes out. We put out last week, we put out episode 0, which was kind of boring, but just kind of going over the rules of the RPG. I know some people really like that part of RPG podcasts, so we're going over the rules, kind of introducing you to the world that we're playing in, and then this week starts the first official podcast. So it's my favorite thing is the game that we're playing. It's called Octoon Cthulhu, and it's like how they sell it is like, have you ever wanted to punch a Nazi in the face? And it's just like, it's like, so it's all during like World War II, and basically what's happening is you have World War II going on, but like Hitler and the Nazis aren't the worst thing that's happening. Is that based on historical accuracy, Hitler was definitely like looking into the occult and stuff back then.
Hence all the Indiana Jones movies.
Right. And just trying to find anything he could that would give them a leg up to win. And so this basically says, they found it, and they have been like awakening, the deep and Cthulhu and all these ancient mythos creatures and stuff. And so the Americans and the British have to like create these 2 secret agencies that have to go fight, to stop them from like releasing and like ending our world. Basically, it's super cool. And so if you like it, if you like that sort of stuff, it's very pulpy. So it's like Captain America and Inglourious Bastards and like all that like pulp World War II stuff. It's very much in line with that. So go check it out. We've got a good group of players, and it's a ton of fun, and we've been really enjoying ourselves. So
it sounds fantastic.
I'm excited.
I've always enjoyed that like Cthulhu like setting.
Me too.
So
and this one's, it's fun because of the pulp side. So like a lot of the Cthulhu stuff, like RPGs like Call of Cthulhu or Delta Green, it's very like, hey, it's Kyle and Jay, just like some normal dudes that maybe are like have some background that like helps them, like one, maybe one works at a newspaper or the other one's a cop or something, and they're just in this world And then all of a sudden some insane stuff happens and they have to mentally deal with that and then try to like stop it at the same time. Which is this Octoon Cthulhu is more like, yeah, no, we got it, we know what's going on, but we're gonna use the magic and the mythos, and like, there's all like, there's characters that could tap into like the powers of Thor, and so there's all these other like mythic stuff going on, which is pretty sweet. So yeah.
That sounds one of the things that one of my favorite RPG systems. And I know this is a hobby episode, but
no, it's fine.
Sorry, folks will have to deal with the RPG opening here.
They can skip through.
Yeah, is Shadowrun.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I like it is because it's kind of like a self-aware mashup of everything ridiculous about sci-fi and fantasy all at the same time. In a way that's also like a little bit self-mocking, which is really funny. But I love that kind of stuff because, like, it's all the things that you love all at once. Yeah. At some point somebody was like, why can't we do that? And we're like, I don't know, let's just do it. Yeah. This sounds very similar, where it's like,
it is,
hey,
yeah.
You want a World War II setting for the historical nuts? Check. You want the Cthulhu stuff for like all that, like, check. Okay, you want superheroes with like Captain America and Thor style stuff? Check.
Yeah.
Why not? Let's just throw it all in one setting and see what happens.
They even have like a race of aliens too that like are in, so they're, because Cthulhu is from like another dimension type of stuff, but like these aliens are in our dimension on another planet, but they worship one of the mythos eldritch gods or whatever. So, and have created portals that have brought them to our world. So it's just amazing. I think it's like, if you watched Lovecraft Country, it's like all the like really cool stuff that was going on in there. It's very much that, very pulpy, very like, oh, I'm gonna, you just run and gun type of stuff.
HP Lovecraft meets Marvel meets World War II.
Yeah, it's amazing. So anyways, if you want to, Iron and Tentacles is the name of the podcast. Please check it out and just give us a listen and let me know what you think. I'm very excited about it. So
awesome. I wish that I could do it, but alas.
Hey, we all like playing games. If we could do like a podcast that was like playing Legion, I probably would do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess that's a battle report.
That's literally what it would be.
Yeah. Or you could do what Stabcast does, where they do like the post-battle report and description of their games or whatever.
Yep.
I meant like play the game.
Right. Yeah, I got you. That would be, it would be, I guess it wouldn't be a battle report so much as just a live stream of a game.
Yeah, I guess it would. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Which people would probably watch. We've done that before.
Yeah, we have. Some people watch it.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
Well, folks, if that's something you want to see us do again, let us know.
Yeah. You can let us know. I don't know if we'll do it, but you can tell us if you want to see it. Maybe.
We'll take it into consideration. I mean, we do like actually take stuff from the podcast topics section of our Patreon. That's one of the most useful channels for me anyway.
Especially lately. Yeah, it's been very helpful to us because Kyle will be like, what do we want to talk about? And we're like, I don't know, head into podcast topics.
Yep.
And then we grab some stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so if you want to suggest some topics, do that.
Yep. That's on our Discord, our Patreon Discord.
That's on the Patreon Discord.
You can join up on Patreon and enter our Discord and throw us some topics. Yeah. And come talk to us about everything else. It'll be fun.
Yep. All right. Hobby.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a couple things today. Some of this is going to be like extremely basic. But this is technically like a hobby 101 thing.
Yes.
And a lot of these tips are, so one of the things we're going to talk about today is assembly, like literally how to put the minis together.
I have changed my tune on this 1,000%. So this is a great topic.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic because people have differing opinions on this. I have seen people post, like, I've seen a lot of frustration posts specifically around like B1s and minis like that, but we're getting a lot of more spindly things with connection, so I think it's a worthwhile topic, even though it seems super basic. We're going to talk about blending and the different types of things that you can do with blending, which is obviously quite a bit more advanced than assembly, but also kind of a 101 hobby thing. And then Jay, you've been trying to put together some ideas for a table.
Yeah.
So before we hit assembly or blending, I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, okay. So I think I've said this on here before, but if I haven't on the podcast, I definitely have told a lot of people. I think my favorite thing about any miniatures game, but Star Wars game, the Legion in particular, is making terrain. Like that's probably one of my favorite things to do. It always has been. Even when I was playing like D&D, I used to make like terrain features and try to build like actual three-dimensional boards and stuff
Yep.
like that. It's one of my favorite things to do. I try to, as much as I can, of as much as I love 3D printing and resin printers, I try to avoid 3D printed boards. When I'm, unless I'm in a hurry and I need a table or something,
Yep.
for a tournament. But yeah, I love the process and the hobby, and so I was watching it's episodic TV show on Disney Plus. It's like there's two. There's the Imagineers. Like it talks about how the Imagineers started and like what they do, all the way up to basically modern times. And I was just watching, and like when they build, for instance, when they're doing like designing Star Wars land, right, Galaxy's Edge, they actually build it as a model, and they build it in multiple scales. So they build like almost a legion. Well, first it's like a little model, like that would fit on an 8.5 by 11. Like, okay, here's the planning, blah, 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 blah. And then the next one
A
is,
center for ants.
yeah, 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 a flea circus.
Yep.
And then the next one is almost like a legion table size, and then the next one is like the size of your garage, and so they so that they could get all the details right. And
Yep.
anyways, I was watching this, and I was just like, and watching some of their techniques, and they don't go deep into it, but you can watch the videos and kind of, if you've done similar stuff, you get a gauge of what they're doing. But anyways, I was watching this, and then I noticed in one of them, and Rachel is getting mad because I was like rewinding it. Wait. I got to watch that again. And they had it where it was modular, right? And I was like, huh, that's, I think we've all thought about modular tables, but the question that came to my mind was, one, I would love to design like a movie prop modeled table for Legion, right? That's just completely beautiful and immersive. But then the other problem is, and our buddy Jim Martin can attest to this, is he builds these beautiful tables, but is how do you do that, but also make it not only playable competitively, but also replayable.
Right.
Those are the big ones, right? Where even if it's not something you're taking to a tournament or Adepticon or something, what's something I could put together here at my house, and that Evan and I can play on once a week, and never have an advantage because of a table side we've played like 13 times, but and I know most of you would say, well, Jay, just use one of your mats that you design and put, movable terrain on it. And I want to build something that's like the whole thing's immersive from the ground up. But also I want it to be modular so I can move it around, and I'm just been thinking a lot about this and how to go about it. And I think what I've come up with is it's twofold. I think you would have to you start with the ground itself, right? So that would have to be modular, and you could do that in like you could do 1 foot by 1 foot squares. That's a little small, but you could, you have these modular bases that can move around, but that means they all have to fit together. So it's going to have to be like, if you have hills, you're going to have to either have that in one little module, or you have multiple modules that can be rearranged for hills or something, like, so I've been thinking a lot about that. And then for buildings and stuff, I almost wonder you'd have to do it in a way where same as how you would build a regular table, right? Where you basically have like three levels of terrain. You have kind of your scatter, little boxes and
Yep.
things like that. You have your barricade slash cover, hardcover level, and then you have basically the next level is area or you know line of sight blocking. I think those two kind of where it's just a permanent, it's like, okay, that's a building, it's sitting there, that's not something I need to think about. And I just wonder, do you build that stuff into each little module section in a way that you could move the whole modular section? So it may have been on, your right hand far right corner side of the table this game, and then I can switch it up and now it's in the middle. So I think that might be the best way to do it, is each modular piece, whatever that size is, whether it's 1 by 1 or whatever, but those are all constructed fully. They don't move. You don't pick up the terrain. It's all on there. Or if you do pick it up, there's an easy way to and then place it back exactly where it was, maybe with some magnets or something. And if it's a building, what you could do is you have maybe just as an example, right? Maybe you have like bricks or stone or something for a foundation, and the building slides into the foundation. But like if you need to see if you can see something, you could just pull the building up, but it still leaves like the outline of the building there, with the foundation, something
Mhm.
like that. Just been thinking a lot about that.
Yeah, I think those are the most challenging types of tables to build,
Yeah.
just because for stuff that is modular, like you said, it needs to fit together in a way that is variable if you
Yeah.
don't want it to be exactly the same every time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you'd have to put a lot of work into the design part of it before you actually started building anything.
For sure.
Um, that's definitely not one of those situations where you can get halfway through and be like, I think maybe I'll try this
Yeah.
instead. Um,
Well, and that's where
um,
that the prototypes, right? Like
yep,
Disney did, the Imagineers do before they actually go build a set or a land or whatever, right? Like I think you would have to do that. Like I'd have to like design it with like paper cut out and then okay and rearrange it. What if I move this here? What if I did, you know what I mean? And then go, okay, that's good. I'm gonna build you know, a scale model of that, which, could be like might be 19 by like 12 or something, or 20 by 12, and then okay, oh yep, this works. All right, great. I'm gonna go full scale now and go to the Legion scale. But yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about like, you could do area terrain. Like what you could do is have an area on the where it's a different type of flock or grass, but it's very like clear line, line between that, and then you could put the trees on top of that for like forest area or
yeah.
whatever. Um, yeah, I just been thinking a lot about this because I just one of the best things when you're at a tournament at a convention or something, right, is people come over and because of the terrain. Like sometimes for
Yep.
the models, if you have an ATST or an AAT or T47 out or something, right? Some of the bigger models, they'll come take a look at those. But for the most part, they see a familiar or what they think is familiar, like, oh, that looks like Endor. What are they doing over there? And then they come talk to you, right?
Yep.
And I would just and one of my favorite things about Jim Martin's tables is how like beautiful they are. Like his Scarif table is probably one of the most beautiful tables I've ever seen.
Yep.
Um, and I don't think he would disagree with what I'm about to say, but it's very difficult to play on because it's not, he brings it to all these competitive tournaments, but it's not really like super competitive, balanced. But how could you do that? And that's just basically what I've been thinking a lot about. And like, I just want to build a beautiful table and like have it playable and take it to a convention and have everybody be like, oh yeah, that was really good to play on.
So I think a good candidate for that
Hmm.
potentially could be Hoth, because trenches are one of those things that just never really quite look right when they're done as like a piece of terrain that you just put on a flat surface. Um, but there's something that's a good candidate to like put into a modular table.
Yeah.
And I think that you could, trenches are also like, as long as you make your connection points in
Yeah.
consistent spots, it's one of those things where you can kind of like flip them around and switch them around, and you can have trenches that connect from
Yeah.
one piece to the next in different configurations. Um, so yeah, I think Hoth could potentially be a good candidate for that. I've seen a couple people attempt Hoth tables with like dug in trenches that look pretty good,
Yeah.
with various degrees of variability on the setup, obviously. But yeah, I think Hoth could potentially be a good candidate for that. With some other stuff, unless you're trying to create like hills or like elevation changes or something that's like down into the table surface, it feels like kind of more effort than it's worth to do a table setup like that. Um, but yeah, for something like Hoth or something else like that, where you have trenches or some other thing that like goes down into the table surface, that seems like that would be a good candidate for what you're describing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. But that, it's funny when you were saying that, just in my head, I'm like, yeah, that does seem like the easiest one. Therefore, I shouldn't do it. Like, that does not
You
seem
gotta.
nearly as impressive enough, Kyle. I'm just like, yeah, you could definitely do it. Then, like, do something else.
I think that'd be pretty darn impressive, even if it was Hoth.
I want to take it
Um,
to another level, Kyle.
okay, well that's
There
fair.
was God, I forgot the planet, but one of the planets in Jedi Fallen Order, it was like it had like grass and snow and these really cool buildings, and like an Imperial outpost.
Hmm,
And I always wanted to build that one. Like, it was just so neat, like such a like cool concept. But then, the other problem with this too is, not problem, but I think one of the things when you're building this too is, right, with the new rules with cover and line of sight and everything, they lend themselves to more like clear delineated surfaces and like straight edges and stuff, right? So
yeah,
how do you also, you know, build that into the table too, where you're like, when you do that, trees are easy because it's area. So you say,
right.
okay, that's area forest. So that's gonna, wherever that line of that flocking is, if I've drawn a line through that, that's cover. Buildings become a little bit more difficult, especially if they're like,
If they're built into the table surface.
yeah. And
Yeah,
so like part of me was thinking like you could almost do stone in the ground around the building in like a very like solid some sort of a like a rectangle or partial rectangle or something, and just be like, hey, if it's stone, we're considering that part of the building, which means it's line of sight blocking. And you know what I mean, and you could
right.
just
You'd
you'll
have to you'd have to create a way so
yeah.
that the terrain features could be easily identifiable from the table surface. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
which could kind of defeat the purpose,
yeah.
I guess. But yeah,
Well, and
yeah,
I know this is an oversimplification, but like I was talking to somebody recently who's newer to the game, and they're like, so what? How do I deal with cover and line of sight? I go, basically, just treat everything as it's 2D, and you just go, okay, did I draw a line through this? Yes, then I have that cover.
yeah,
Like, I mean, I know that's an oversimplification, but
yeah, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just okay, just look bottom down, everything's 2D. Draw a line through it. It does it go through that? Because at this point, the where in the silhouette, or it just doesn't matter.
Most of
As
the time, it does
most of
not.
the time,
Yeah,
speeder, T47s and ATSTs are a little bit different, but ATST not really. The speeders, because of they're the little cylinder pies
yeah,
around the speeder itself, versus the whole like huge cylinder.
yep, yeah. Most of the time, it's just 2D.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which, I mean, I don't know.
I don't want to turn this into a cover discussion.
Yeah, you're right. All right. I'm sorry. You're right.
Um,
You're right. You're right. I
yep.
apologize. I was just thinking about it from a terrain perspective. So like
No,
I was thinking
well,
like
which is relevant.
right.
And
But
from a yeah,
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
well, from a terrain perspective, for those that are looking to make tables, even if they're not thinking as ambitious as you are, Jay, the new cover rules do not work as well with things that don't have clean, straight, smooth edges, uh,
Hmm.
or terrain pieces that are not as easily defined on the edges. So, like, if you're trying to make stuff that is more functional or less dysfunctional, depending on how you want to look at it, with the new cover and line of sight rules, it behooves you to make pieces that have like
Yeah.
uniform shapes and smooth edges, basically.
Yep.
Think like a speedball for paintball. Think like a speedball arena versus, just like playing paintball in the woods. Basically, that's what the new cover rules are going to be more functional with. So
Yeah, well, and that's what okay, so like imagine you have a building, right? And it has like a basement or whatever you want to call it. But then maybe around it in the ground or like is like a stone walkway that just kind of goes around the building, like, not very far from it, maybe like a quarter of an inch or half an inch or something.
uh
And then you just go, okay, that stone walkway is the building. So then any of the overhangs and whatever like little edges you have on the building, they just don't matter. It's
yep.
just the stone, it's just that little stone walkway around it. That's your shape that you're 2D drawing through.
Right. So the footprint of the building is essentially a rectangle, even if
Yeah,
what's inside that rectangle has variable
exactly.
shape. Yeah. Yep.
That's the best way I could come up with it.
Yep.
And then I just remembered the planet. It's Zepho.
Zepho. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds right. Yep.
That was, I don't know why, but that just like that planet just struck me. I think because like it had all these mountains and like waterfalls, but it also had like snow on the ground with
Yep.
grass. And it was just like, I don't know. And then the Imperial, like the Imperial base that was there was just super cool. And the whole thing was just really neat.
In general, the Fallen Order planets are all really interesting looking.
Yeah.
Um, all right.
Anyways. Yeah. So that was my whole. We'll see. I always get super. I'm sure we're all like this, where I'm just like I get this crazy idea, I get super ambitious about it.
Yep.
We'll see where it goes from here. But that's where I'm at
Yep.
right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. And sometimes it gets followed through on, and sometimes
Yeah,
it doesn't.
yeah,
Um, all right. Shall we talk about? Let's do assembly first because I feel like that's a
yeah.
more one-on-one topic than blending. Um, so I think there's kind of two separate lines here, right? The first is your mini hard plastic on a sprue or not? Because there still are some Legion minis that come in these bad boys here. This is a bag of body parts, basically. I think this one, what is this one? Oh, this is a snow trooper that I have not assembled yet for some reason. If you've got yourself a bag of body parts, all you really need to do is take some super glue and put them in the joints and shove them together.
Yep.
It may not look great. That's the quickest way to get it to the table. I have noticed a couple things with the soft plastic. The first is that the joints don't always fit cleanly. And sometimes you have to use some kind of filler to like fill in the cracks if you don't want there to be gaps at like the shoulders or wherever else the joints are. Sometimes you have to so what we mean by filler, for those that don't know, there's several different ways to do this. You could just use like a thicker glue, like Elmer's glue. If it's like a really thin gap that doesn't need a lot of stuff in it, you could use if it's a ginormous one, you could use green stuff, which is a Games Workshop Citadel product, but it's basically like a putty.
Yeah.
I
So
have some right here.
it's like
But
Play-Doh. You have
it's
two
yeah,
colors. You have yellow and blue. You mix them together, it makes green stuff.
Yep.
And there's a lot of other ones that put it out too. But not just, you don't have to get Citadel. A bunch of people put it out now, but
Yep.
you make green and it makes it green, and then you form it in, and you can use water. You put water on your finger and you can kind of smooth it out,
Yep.
and then put it in the crack to make it match the rest of the thing. They also have liquid green stuff, which is
Yes.
kind of good too.
Yeah, I've actually tried liquid green stuff. I was less impressed with it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
because I
know.
think it's more for what you were first pointing out with the Elmer's glue.
Yeah, with the for the really it's for really small gaps.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think in all of our heads, because it was green stuff, you're like, I'm just gonna put this in this huge hole.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's
No,
not what it's for.
that's not what it's for.
Yeah.
If you've got a big gap, which will happen on some of these soft plastic models, and you want to fill that gap, you either need to shave down some plastic to make it fit better,
Yeah.
or you need to use actual green stuff.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the other thing that you got to keep in mind on these soft plastic models is a lot of them have mold lines,
Yep.
which is basically that annoying little line that goes all the way down one side of the model. Um, and that's from, when two halves of the mold smush together, and you get a line between the two halves of the mold. So if you don't want that to show up, you got to shave it off. And the best way to do that is just with a hobby knife.
Yep.
Um,
I've also found you can get you could get cardboard nail files from Walmart or wherever, right?
uh-huh.
And they'll have like a rough sandpaper side and then a fine sandpaper side. And I find that the fine sandpaper side is actually really nice on the plastic, like,
Okay.
and can pull some of those edges off pretty quick. And
Yeah.
because it's meant for nails, it's meant for like a smaller surface, so they're like good size and everything too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I use a sanding block, but it's definitely a little unwieldy in some of those situations. So I might have to get some. I'm sure my wife has some nail files that I
That's where
can
I got
just
my
steal.
first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a rough
Um,
day in the old Shalansky household.
all right. So that is soft plastic.
Yep.
Um, you will also need to glue them to the base with super glue.
Yep.
Do not use plastic glue on the soft plastic. It will not do
Nope.
anything. Literally nothing except get it liquidy.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're frustrated why your plastic is not sticking together with your soft plastic, it's probably because you are using plastic glue and not
Yep.
super glue.
Yeah. And here's the positives of this. There's negatives and positives. For some reason, the super glue, though it sticks, it doesn't stick the way you want it to. So what'll happen is it'll be fine. And then if you're traveling and you hot, cold, and then moving in it, and then all of a sudden an arm will fall off.
Yep.
It just, but the positive is if you drop it, they don't break. The
They
arm
don't.
just comes off,
Right.
or the
Yep.
leg or whatever, and you just super glue it back on, and you're good to go. So yeah,
Yeah.
those
The
are the
soft
positives.
plastic is very bendy.
Yeah.
I remember when I first met Mike, one of the first games we played at a game store a few times, and then at one point I went to his house and played a game, and I don't remember who knocked the mini off the table, but one of us knocked like one of his stormtroopers off the table, and I just kind of like stumbled backwards and I literally stepped on it. And like this was me coming from Games Workshop, where
Yeah.
like I'm super anal about everything. I was mortified. I'm like, oh crap, what did I just do?
No,
I picked up my
no.
foot and I looked at the stormtrooper, and it was like completely fine.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing had happened to it. Like I was wearing boots, you know, like I stepped like full force on a hardwood floor on this stormtrooper, and it just went like broop. Like it's totally fine. I'm like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, soft plastic.
I've said this I for sure on this cast, but that was one of the like reasons why I loved
Yeah, it's
Legion in the beginning so much, because I came from, same as you, from fantasy Warhammer, and I was just like, oh man, like high elves with all their little sticky oh my god, like I was breaking stuff all the time, dropping it shattered, and good luck getting it back together, you know what I mean? And then the soft plastic, I'm like literally throwing Vader across the room and like nothing's happening, and I'm like, I'm invincible.
Yeah.
You know?
For me, it was one of the things that I liked least about Legion coming from, because the model quality is so much lower. And you got to do things like straighten the lightsabers with, you know what, let's talk about that, because that is part of assembly. One of the problems with soft plastic is it's not rigid, right? That's why it's called soft plastic. So sometimes when you're talking about like a stormtrooper or a rebel trooper, if you know, you're not going to notice as much if something is just a little bit bent out of shape. But if you've got like Vader or Luke and their lightsaber is not perfectly straight, that annoys the crap out of me. And I definitely had with both Luke and Vader a lightsaber that was not straight. So basically what you have to do is run it under hot water to like loosen it up a little bit.
Yep.
Bend it. Have like a glass of ice water nearby when you do this. Bend it to where you want it to go, hopefully in a way that is straight, and then like immediately stick it in the ice water.
Yep.
So I think they even put out like instructions on this when Legion first came out, because it was such a common problem.
Yep, they sure did.
The other thing you could do, of course, if you have like a Clone Wars core set, you probably have one or more extra Grievous arms. Just chop off the hard plastic lightsaber and stick it on.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Stick it on wherever the soft plastic lightsaber is, and then you have yourself a straight lightsaber.
Yeah, but just be prepared that that's going to be something you need to keep an eye on for the rest of that model's life, especially if you're putting it in and out of foam.
Oh yeah, like don't put that in foam because it will just snap off.
Yeah.
And it's probably too thin to pin.
Yep.
Which I think we've actually
we've
talked about pinning?
Yeah.
So we don't need to talk about pinning again.
When Dark Troopers came out, we definitely covered it.
Part of assembly, obviously, but so go back to whatever hobby episode that is if you want to know about pinning. Yep. But basically, you put a metal rod in between the two pieces of plastic and then glue them over the metal rod so they stay that way. All right. Anything else on soft plastic?
No.
Okay. Hard plastic. If your stuff comes on a sprue, which is one of these bad boys, that's hard plastic. So you're gonna need to clip your things off, and then you're gonna need to stick them together. Clipping things off, step one, obviously. So actually not necessarily step one. I have heard of people painting stuff on the sprue. Have you heard of this, Jay?
I've tried it. I think last time we talked about painting, I said that I was going to try on the sprue painting.
Yeah.
I hated it. But yeah, I did it.
I've tried it too. I also hated it. I know that some people like it because it allows you to really get like every nook and cranny.
Yep.
Particularly for minis that are holding like rifles or something, like right up to their chest. You can also just do it in stages, like for my Space Marines who have those Aquillas right there, the eagles right there on their chest. I used to just like not glue the arm on and then paint the eagle and then put everything together and then paint the rest of the mini. There are ways to do that where you don't have to paint it on the sprue. If you're one of those people that paint stuff on the sprue and you like it, great, more power to you. I guess you do that before you do all this other stuff.
You're doing great.
Yep. I didn't like it because once you clip the clipping points, you have a gray section of mini that you need to paint over anyway.
Yeah. Well, I've tried like I've done just prime on the sprue, then assemble, then paint. I hated that because it was just like in the process of like cutting them off the sprues, I'm chipping the paint. Like if I'm not like real careful, not only where the sprue is connected, but also wherever the clippers may have gotten, and then or if I didn't clip it right and I go to sand it down or to like clean it up, I accidentally like get somewhere else, and now now I just got to repaint this whole section. Like what was I doing? Like why did I even do this?
Before airbrush I used to prime on the sprue because sometimes it would frustrate me when I couldn't get that black primer all the way into some part of the mini just because I couldn't get to it. Now with an airbrush I've noticed that's like less of an issue. Because because I can get to all the places I need to get to. But yeah, I see I see the reasoning for priming on the sprue.
No, I get it.
But
yeah, because
yeah,
we've all been there, right? With like a rattle can,
yep,
and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm done. And you walk in the house, and then you realize the whole bottom of it is still gray, and you're like, son of a, like, oh God.
yep,
And then you go back out, and like, yeah, no, I think that's probably the difference too, right? Is I've moved to priming with the airbrush now.
yeah.
So I'm like, I don't
I
even
think
really think about that as much anymore. Like,
yeah. If you rattle can, I think there's still a strong argument for priming on the sprue just to make sure you get good
yeah,
coverage.
yeah.
But all right, so
Can I
clipping.
say something real quick about rattle
Yes,
can?
sure.
Real quick.
Yep.
You do not have to buy the Army Painter or Citadel $20 primers. Okay, listen to me real closely, everyone. You can go get, let's see, you could get Rust-Oleum. You can get, I would do the Rust-Oleum one. That's the one I like the best. It has to say bonds to plastic, and you get the 2x more Rust-Oleum bonds to plastic, the black. It goes on real smooth. It's like $3 versus 20. And I like it a lot.
I
So
have tried the non-miniature based rattle cans. I did personally not like them, but it's also been a while since I've primed anything with a rattle can.
yeah,
So I will say with rattle cans in general, whether you're using the miniature branded ones or not, make sure you check your weather
yeah,
because um if it's too humid, if it's too dry, if it's too cold, if it's too hot, and you're priming something, like you can cause some permanent damage basically
yep.
to your miniatures. If the all that stuff is not where it needs to be. So make sure you're like checking the weather. I ruined like an entire batch of minis one time when it was just too humid and
Yeah.
I primed all of it and like they were fuzzy. And I was like, well, what do I do now? I guess I have to like strip all these fuzzy orcs that I have and start over. And I tried to strip them, and it like primer is hard to strip properly. Um,
Yep.
I did the simple green, I did the purple power, I did the stuff from AutoZone. Like none of it worked. So
Yeah.
ultimately, I ended up like not using those minis anyway. So I guess that problem sort of worked itself out. But yeah, make sure that if you're using a rattle can, make sure the weather is correct for what you're doing. So
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I live in a particularly nasty place
yep,
for spray painting. We always have a high humidity. 6 months out of the half the year is winter, basically, where I'm at, so it's yeah, I that's one of the reasons why I switched to just priming with the airbrush, because it was like, dude, I can't like wait for a not rainy, snowy day. Oh, okay, it's sunny. Oh man, the humidity's way up. Oh God, like it's so
yeah,
airbrush is, if you can, if you have the means, otherwise.
yeah, and that's a whole nother world,
Sorry.
basically.
Yeah, we're talking
Yep.
about.
No, I get you though. I mean, it's hard to talk about priming without talking about airbrush,
Yep,
which is
the
both a
bats.
whole nother level of difficulty and also like an easy button once you figure it out.
Yep.
So it's like sorcery, basically. It's
Yep.
just yeah. Okay. Clipping stuff off the sprue. You're gonna want to use sprue clippers. Please do not try and cut things off the sprue with a hobby knife or a razor blade. You will cut yourself. You will cut the mini in places that you do not want to cut the mini.
Or wire clippers. I
Do not
tried
use
that
wire clippers either. Yeah.
way early on. When I first started in the hobby, when I was just a young lad, I grabbed a pair of my grandfather's wire clippers. I was like, this looks exactly like what they were using at the hobby store. And no, it is not. They're much larger.
Yeah. Besides the size, the other primary difference is you'll notice if you can see on the YouTube here, these sprue clippers, they're perfectly flat on one
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
Whereas if you just go get like wire cutters or something, they're gonna have like a peak. Like
yep,
so sprue clippers are perfectly flat on one side. So you put the flat part up against the mini. So you're actually getting like a clean cut. You might still need to go in there with like a sanding block or a nail file or a hobby knife and kind of trim off, like there might just be a little bit left from that connection point still that you have to like carefully trim off.
Mm.
But that's much easier to do once it's off the sprue.
Yep.
So yeah, if you're going crazy trying to get B1s off the sprue, some guy ages ago when the Clone Wars starter came out was just posting like horror stories, I remember, of trying to put B1s together. He's like, I'm cutting my fingers, like how do I get these off? Like
Yeah.
I chopped this B1's arm in half. It's like, well, you're using sprue clippers. They're like, what's sprue clippers? Yeah. It's like the dude was trying to use an X-Acto knife. He was trying to use like scissors. Like it was, yeah. All right. Next, glue. So we talked about super glue. Super glue does, of course, work on hard plastic.
I have an anecdote for this, Kyle, and I've come around.
Have you come around to the plastic glue?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm 100% in on plastic glue now.
All right.
But no, I mean, here was my reasoning.
Okay.
And I used to do this with Warhammer too. This is not something that from a hard or soft to hard plastic issue I was having. But when you use soft plastic, we're going to talk about this, but it melds, basically like fuses the pieces together, right? Which is great.
When you use plastic glue.
When you use
on hard plastic
glue,
glue,
on hard plastic. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It like fuses things together, which is great.
Yeah.
But my experience, and I'm a dropper.
Yep.
I'm a dropper. And so my experience has been when I used plastic glue, especially in Warhammer, and I dropped something, it would break in a place I made that was even worse than, you know, an arm socket or something, right? And so for the longest time, when Legion moved over to hard plastic, I was still using super glue and Kyle used to yell at me and I'd be like, yeah, but when I drop it, its arm just comes off and I could just grab the arm and I could just super glue it back on and move on with my life, you know? But yeah, it was a lot harder to super glue those together, and you don't get a great fit. You get a bunch of other problems. Even though you can super glue it back on, you get sticky fingers. Yeah, all that stuff. So I've just moved right to to the plastic glue now.
Yeah. So the benefits of super glue are primarily that it dries faster. The drawbacks, you mentioned several of them. When I use super glue on, well, anything really, but especially on the hard plastic models, which tend to have smaller connection points, is I stick my fingers together.
Yep.
I stick my fingers to other things. I stick my
to the
fingers
model.
to the model. Yeah. So, and then as you noted, the whole point of plastic glue is that you get a stronger bond because it literally melts the plastic into the other plastic.
Yep.
So you can use super glue if you want. You know, it's certainly like a more replaceable than trying to use something besides hobby clippers to get the model off the sprue. I prefer plastic glue. There are lots of different brands. The bottles often look like this. This is the Citadel one, but yeah, it is specifically like designed to glue hard plastic together.
Yeah.
It does not dry as fast as super glue, which is the primary drawback. Usually, though, I've found, at least with the Citadel stuff, it dries quickly enough that it will kind of stay in place once you stick it together. Just bear in mind that it's not like fully set. So don't be doing stuff with, you know, you glue an arm on, don't be like using that arm.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Arm.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's a lot faster than I remember it being. So the formula must have, you know, they must have just made better version of it, because it's been a lot faster than I remember. I'm an impatient man, but a young kid I was even more impatient, so you know, I'm sure that had something to do with it too.
Yeah, the other thing I like about the plastic glue with hard plastic minis is, you know, a lot of miniatures in Legion are holding rifles or other things in their hands where they're holding it with two hands, but of course those are two separate, sometimes three separate pieces. And the plastic glue allows you to kind of like stick everything together and then move it around a little bit while it's stuck together to the position that you want, because it's not fully set immediately. So like you can, you know, if you've got one arm that has the arm and the gun, and then you've got the other arm that's like, from the shoulder to the wrist joint that connects to the gun. You can glue the arm that has the gun on it first, let that set for 10 to 15 seconds, and then glue the other arm on, glue the wrist together, and then, hold it where you want it or move it around. Without having to, like, if you'd done that with super glue, you'd need to know exactly where that first arm went before you actually glued it on. Whereas you can kind of fiddle with the fit a little bit with plastic glue. So yeah, use plastic glue would be my recommendation.
Here's the other thing. With super glue, if you accidentally get it on the model somewhere else, you generally you can wipe it off quick if you're quick, right?
Yep.
Or if it dries, you can kind of scrape it off with the edge of the blade, right? If you get plastic glue somewhere where you don't want it, you need to get it off really quick, and if you don't, you're in big trouble because it's going to start melting that plastic.
It will, it could potentially mar the detail a little bit.
Yep. Well, it gets the plastic will get all liquidy, and then it'll start to like, it starts.
I've noticed that it's not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah, it's still though. You gotta pay attention because if there's definitely times I've accidentally gotten it somewhere, and then I'm like moved on, and I'm like painting other stuff, and then I'm like, and try to like wipe it off, and like the plastic's like stringing off of it, and I'm like, God, what have I done?
Yeah, you got to be a little more careful with where you put it.
Yep.
The one last thing with glue is when you are gluing even your hard plastic models to their bases, you still want to use super glue.
Yes.
Because the base plastic, for whatever reason, is like a slightly different kind. And you don't get a good bond if you're using plastic glue. They can still kind of stick sometimes because you get like that vacuum seal like between the foot and the base. But it's not going to be as strong of a seal as if you just use super glue for that. So yeah, still use super glue between the foot and the base, even with a hard plastic model. All right. Anything further on assembly?
No, I think we covered most of everything.
Yeah. All right. Should we talk real quick about blending?
Yeah, if we can we be quick about it? It's a big topic.
It is a big topic.
But yeah, we could try. I mean, there's like what, three different kinds of blending.
Yeah, so I'm specifically thinking of. All right, so let me tell you what I'm thinking of.
Okay, yeah.
I'm thinking of the kind where you like basically mix colors on a palette and then slowly work up a color from one to the next.
Wet blending. Yeah.
Well, no, so wet blending is where you're blending on the model. And actually Sarastro does a couple of videos on this, but this is where you like you paint something that's wet. Like suppose, all right, I guess we can quickly talk about wet blending because I think that's the easiest, albeit the least interesting looking, in my opinion, of the blending methods. So look at this here. This is actually a good example.
Yeah.
I just happen to have this here. This is unfortunately has a green section on it, but anyway, this random Apple gift card here for wet blending. So if you can, basically there's orange on one side, there's greenish blue on the other, and in the middle is like, particularly at the top here, is like a mix of the two, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing wet blending, you're going to want to add a little medium to your paint, which is, I have some right here. I don't know if things other than Citadel sell this, but this is Lamian medium from Citadel, and all it does is it makes the paint wetter.
Yep.
And literally what it does. So regardless of what kind of blending you're doing, you're going to need some of this. But if you're doing wet blending, you're still going to need some. So you would just paint, in the context of this gift card here, you'd paint orange on one side all the way to like, over like 60 to 70% towards the other side. And then while that was still wet before it was drying, and hopefully it would still be wet because you used some medium, you would then take blue on your brush and paint it from the other side, or you'd want to clean your brush off in between these two, obviously. Paint it on the other side towards the orange side, and then just kind of like swirl it around and mix it in the middle. That's wet blending. It doesn't get as like, I mean, unless you're super good at it, like Sarastro is. I have found that you don't get as smooth of a transition when you do that. But that's one way to do it. What I do basically, I use this a lot for things that have depth and texture, like clothing or skin, like organic stuff, basically. Is I will mix my colors on a palette. So let's use the example of like a cloak, right? You paint the cloak with, say you're doing a red cloak. You paint the cloak with the darkest red you have.
Yep.
You take your next darkest red and then you mix it 50-50 with the red that you just used on your palette.
I see. Yep.
Yeah. So this is a wet palette. You can see here actually I have a recent this looks,
that's all right.
Based on this color, this actually looks like a blending attempt for skin. This is a wet palette. I think we've talked about wet palettes before on the show, but basically you can get these for like $10 on Amazon or at Michael's or whatever. It's a sheet of acrylic paper on top of a sponge in a tray. And this keeps your paint wet. That's why I call it a wet palette. And it's a great place to mix paints on. Again, you want to use Lamian medium or some other medium to keep it wet while you're painting. But basically, you take two colors, you mix them 50-50, you use that, or smaller increments if you want. You use that color, and then you paint like one level up on whatever it is that you're doing for the blending.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. So there's, that I think that's feathering. Technically,
is that what that's called? Okay,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have, so then there's another one called I know like a lot of people call it spit blending, but it's two brush blending.
Okay.
So basically what you do is you apply the paint with the first brush. So whatever the color, whatever the color is. So like what basically maybe a little bit with what you did, right? Where you put the first red on and then you put your second coat of red on. But if I'm going to go to the highest bright of the red and then come down. And then what you do is you take the second brush, which is dry and clean, has nothing on it. And most painters will put it in their mouth to get it a little wet, right?
Okay.
And then you kind of start pulling the paint down towards the other color.
Okay.
And then that's kind of like it's called spit blending because you
literally spit blending.
Yeah, but you can use water. You don't have to
right. Yeah. That's interesting. That sounds like a different kind of wet blending where you're doing it like right on the model.
Yeah, it is. It's like it's like a combination between what you described and what you do and wet blending, like feathering and wet blending. It's like it's a little faster method of doing that, where those other two like require way more layers.
It's a lot of steps.
Yeah.
Mostly the thing that I just described, I mostly just use that on like faces.
Yeah.
And then if I have a model with like that's an important model with like a cloak or something, then I'll do it on that also.
Yeah. The other one I've seen that's pretty cool, like on metal. And like with weathering and stuff is stipling, where you you're just like doing the dots really close together dots, and you go and then mix the next color and it like creates this cool gradient like effect, which is pretty sweet.
Ultimately blending is all about creating gradients, right? Moving from one color to the next in a way that's not like super stark. See, that wasn't that long of a topic.
No, you're right. It wasn't.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it takes a lot of practice to make it.
Yeah.
So that it can look good. I've tried like the wet blending thing. I've tried that repeatedly. I can never get it done in a way. It seems like it looks decent, but
even with practice, it's like,
and if you mess up, you can't go back and like,
no.
You've essentially lost access to that color as soon as you move on.
Yep.
So, because I can never get my color mixes like 100% the same.
No. I yeah, I'm pretty good at that. But yeah, I know
Yeah.
that's difficult. But like yeah, it's like one of those things that I think I've said this before, but it's like I haven't painted in a while. I haven't done hobby in a while, but so like whenever I end up going back to it, there's going to be like 100 things that I was doing the last time that I
Yeah.
completely forgot about, and then I'm like, oh yeah, how do I do this again? Like I look at some of my models that I've been doing lately, like my Magna Guard are really good. I was like, man, how the hell did I do that? Like those
Yep.
turned out really good. And I'm like trying to remember what I did, to get them.
That happens to me a lot with faces.
Yeah.
I'll look back at some of the faces I did even years ago and I'm like, man, that looks great. Like, why can't I do that
Yeah.
again? You know? Like, and I'll have just painted somebody and I'll compare the two to each other and I'll be like, what
Yeah.
is happening here? I thought I did the same thing, but apparently not.
Yeah, I did that with I did the Magna Guard, and then it must have been like month or two later, I ended up doing the super tactical droids, and I was like, oh yeah, I got this. And then the tactical droids did not even come out as good as the other. It's like, dude, what the hell? Like,
Yep.
it's funny.
Yep. It's a familiar problem.
Yeah.
All right. Any further thoughts? Final thoughts?
No. Get out there and hobby.
Yeah. Go do the hobbying. Catch up on your pile of shame while we wait for Geonosians, I guess is the next thing. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Stay cool, fruit mat.